Hi, welcome. In this next series of videos, going to respond to this whole situation by way of Robert Cabral, pictured here, and the another back and forth happening between Cabral and Ivan Balabanov. And the situation again, what triggered all of it again, this whole thing about this thing over corrections, talk about punishment. Again, this dovetails into this whole situation with the upcoming conference, Balanced Dog Training Association's conference that's going to be taking place. And the very interesting part of all this is that these trainers who are going after each other on social media are all scheduled to attend this conference as speakers, as experts within the balanced dog training community, which I find very interesting to say the least. I don't know how this is all even going to even work or play out. These trainers are going after each other, but again, as predicted, again, I talk about this escalation that's been happening in the dog training community over the months and years. You're seeing things get worse and worse and worse through all the confusion, everything that's happening. But again, I talk about the source of the problem, by way of what's being marketed by these trainers as a process, which fails to consider, what training represents in terms of a relationship problem happening between dogs and owners. I talk about, at the social level, based on, again, what that connection represents in terms of the core ingredients I talk about. We talk about influence and control. So in terms of relationship. So this goes beyond, these trainers bring up punishment and corrections. I talk about influence and control, how they're defined properly, through that connection at the social level, in terms of going beyond appearances. So I talk about this problem with appearances with these trainers who are, like 1 minute into a relationship problem are using, treats, motivating dogs to respond while assuming, that those responses can be trusted, at the front end without any sort of consideration as to why the picture that they're generating might be a problem. And more often than not, it is based again on not even engaging a relationship problem the right way by way of taking the path of approaching it as a intervention. It's, again, so I talk about a interaction based approach, which reconciles those core ingredients right away and changes the perception of dogs the right way. So I encourage you to watch my videos on my YouTube channel. You'll see me interacting with dogs. I talk through everything. I show everything in terms of change itself. So, but again, you look at all the confusion, all this back and forth, but even the controversies. I mean, I put out. You can watch it on my channel. It's called Flipping the Script, my series, where I go through all the controversies, but based on information. So it's not about engaging in cheap shots or going after these trainers a certain way at all. It's about auditing a product, auditing this process that is inherently flawed at its core, based on its core tenet, based on approaching training as a learning based exercise and motivating dogs in a very superficial way, which, sets in motion a counterfeit picture change for many, many, many dogs and owners. And again, this is the problem. So, but again, how this all layers up here with these trainers themselves is just, and this is what you're seeing here right now with Cabral and Ivan, is this being triggered, this attempt to gain popularity, gain through marketing, try to establish themselves as as experts, as having answers, when it's completely opposite. That's the reality. These trainers, they never ask the questions that should have been asked from the very beginning as individuals. And so, if you look at what's happening here, all the confusion, but no answers. Okay, it's just this type of triggering effect. And now look at it. I mean, don't have to take my word for anything. Just look at this whole thing that's happening through this through the association of International Association of Canine Professionals, as it's called. Look at all the back and forth. You look at Dylan Jones and Larry Crone, Robert Cabral, now Ivan jumping on board and calling out the president of the association. I did some videos on that, but all the point towards what I'm saying, okay, is showing, okay, here's what the problem is. So these trainers are trying to again establish themselves, but on a foundation that's based on a lie. Okay, understand. And what's the lie? That training is a learning based exercise, the way that they're marketing it. And it's not. And it's in engaging that way sets up all these problems. So all of a sudden, I'm going to be doing a series of videos here. Now, just a heads up, I just posted, okay, the one Ivan just put out a video here like yesterday, talking about this thing with, his dispute with Robert Cabral. Now, I posted the part one of that video on my Rumble channel, and I encourage you to go watch. You can watch, it's kind of like a parallel video series I'm doing, but the reason for putting the Ivan's videos on Rumble is, again, I mentioned this in the past, is that you talk about these trains being triggered. Is I one of the only copyright strikes I ever received in all the years was through Ivan making a complaint through YouTube of me responding to one of his videos under fair usage. Okay, information based, not cheap shots. And I already did an entire video about that whole situation by way of Miracle Canine. Okay, using the exact same video I did, where Ivan did a video, in fact, encouraging people to respond, talking about the source of the problem in the dog training world. That video is in fact still posted up on his Facebook page at the top. So I responded to it, and I just used a few minutes of that video, and he obviously was very upset about it. And that's my point. My point is these trainers, when you start talking about what the actual problem is, guess what? They get very upset. While at the same time, they want to say whatever they want to say on social media and engage the way they're engaging, and then are like, super sensitive, right? When someone steps forward and says, okay, here's what the actual problem is. Because again, understand that's my point. These trainers are all caught up in themselves, their systems, right? But the whole unsettledness part of it, okay, understand there's a reason why, they're triggered. They keep going about wanting to say debate. They keep putting out this information, but it's not settled. Okay. In fact, the dog training world is completely upside down. And so you see all this, divisiveness, all these arguments happening, all this back and forth. Well, that in itself should, get your attention to say, well, there's something wrong here. And again, I did a whole series of videos on all the controversies, talking through all of it, offering a very unique perspective as to what's really happening. So again, you can watch the Ivan my series on Ivan's response on my Rumble channel. Otherwise, again, I post on YouTube, but YouTube being very kind of more censorship driven. Now this is a while back; it may have changed since then, but I don't want to risk it because sure as I'm talking, I put up something with Ivan, and again, that's the amazing thing about this. Ivan is like, in because my whole that whole situation just shows it. These traders put up whatever, yet someone responds and watch out. So my challenge to him was, and I'm still out there. You want to talk through this? Well, I'll go on his podcast and talk about the actual like real problem, and sparks will fly. Not because of cheap shots, because I'm putting, I put the information down, say here it is, and let's have a real conversation. But these trainers, this isn't what this is about. I understand this whole thing between himself and Cabral and all these other, it's not about that. It's just about trying to elevate themselves in social media, protect their system, right? But our show is all these systems, okay, do not reconcile the core ingredients I talk about. Okay, very specific about that. And so it's an open door to a counterfeit picture being set in motion for many, many dogs and owners. That's the reality. So here, I'm going to play again this video here put out by Robert Cabral, where he's talking about, okay, corrections in dog training. Okay, understanding correction. So this comes from, he's a balanced dog trainer. He approaches training as a learning-based exercise. Okay, so let's play some of this because again, these videos. This is a whole thing between himself and Ivan. Is this whole dispute over corrections punishment?
I'm about to launch my brand new masterclass on corrections in dog training, but to be fair, I wanted to give you all the information in this video for free. Later, if you decide you'd like to.
And just stop it quickly here. So he's talking about master class. Now I said this before, but these trainers, like you'll see the word expert, plastered all over their social media. Okay, pretending to have the answers, right? And you go look on my social media, my stuff. I don't put the word expert like anywhere, and I'm the only one actually, talking about what you know defines training. I'm talking about the real problem here. And so, because some of the question is like, how can all these trainers even proclaim themselves to be experts, and they're all, saying different things all the time? Like, what's that even about?
To join the masterclass, you can feel free to do so, but I will give you the information here in this short video, absolutely free. The masterclass contains 34.
So he is, like I said, selling his system. Okay, these trainers, I was the same way. They're all over social media trying to market and sell their system.
Lectures, a bunch of demonstrations, hands-on demonstrations, voiceover lessons. It's 47 different videos and about 4.5 hours worth of instruction. Here is all the information for free.
So he's talking here's all the information for free, and we'll dig into this. Okay, but understand something. When I talk to these trainers, not actually confronting the real issue. I put out very specific information. I've actually gone on to Cabral's comment section, um, and not in a bad way. Okay, not to just cheap shot or anything like that. Put specific information. These trainers understand they're sold out. Okay, understand they're entrenched. And one of my things I'd say is like the further you go down, like if you don't ask these questions at the beginning as a say new trainer, and you start to just move forward with this stuff, it's very difficult to back out of it. Okay, and then you get all these problems, and then what? I mean, that's the thing. Understand these trainers, it's a trap. Okay, understand this is a total trap these trainers are in, and it's a catch 22. There's no coming out of this. Okay, so I put the information out, but understand that these trainers they can't back out of what they're marketing. Okay, there's no kind of middle ground here. I talk about what they've done, what training is.
One, teach before you correct. You can't.
See, so right here we got a problem. Like Houston, we got a problem, right? So, and this is really because I talk about this all starts at the beginning, right here. Teach before you correct. What does that mean? Teach what? I talk about this. Like, what is training? I think about what I'm saying. Like, if you look at all the reason you go into a trainer in the first place is because you're experiencing a relationship problem with your dog. Okay, you got behavioral issues happening. Does that even reconcile to turn it into a learning based exercise? Is it a learning based exercise? Think about the example I use with the parenting example. If you're experiencing a relationship problem with your child who's become very selfish, do you turn it into a learning based exercise by way of it's just about superficial responses? Do you engage at that point that way? No. I mean, you should expect problems if you do it. And there's problems all over. And then when you layer this up and just look at how many dog owners experience a counterfeit picture of change, dogs that are looking fantastic, moving around the training environment, do a great sit, a great down, a great come, a great stay. Only discover you got your certificate, but the relationship hasn't actually gotten any better. This happens all the time. And these trainers, they write it off. It's just like something at the foot of a balance sheet. They just write it off. Just move on. Just the collateral damage. I understand. So right away, I mean, I could stop the video right here. So when I talk about having a conversation with someone like Ivan, Ivan, this is where it all stops. So what defines training? Why would you motivate dogs to respond in the middle of a relationship problem and assume that those responses can be trusted? Like what's actually creating change? I talk about engagement, right? So, I talk about interaction based, the type of power play. Okay, that's the level you're bringing it to, but in which a dog is going to come into agreement with. Okay, it's a type of, I talk about clarity, a type of language that's happening. You watch my videos, you'll see it. These trainers, they're not doing that. You understand? So when he's saying teach before you correct, he's saying motivate dogs this way. Assume that that's you're good to go. That those that you can trust appearances that way. Then let's firm up that already bad picture. Okay, it's already gone sideways. Let's bring some corrections in to firm it up. See, you have to really understand what's going on here with these trainers. We talk about balanced training, talk about the four quadrants, you talk about bringing corrections in. The question I have to ask, does that truly, establish, can that picture still be trusted that way? Absolutely not. Because the core remains I talk about, they're not reconciled that way. Okay, understand that. That's not the way, when I'm training dogs, interacting with dogs, I'm focused on the interaction itself. Okay, it's that type of interplay. That's my focus. Here you get a totally different thing going on. So this is the flaw right here. You have to understand before we even go any further in this video, here it is right here. You have to default right back to that. So anything that moves forward from here is a bad picture for many. Understand that. You open that door completely wide open right here. You just open that door completely wide open for a counterfeit picture. Just understand that.
You cannot expect a dog to know something that you haven't taught them, and you certainly can't correct them for something that.
See, totally superficial. Know what? Teach what? Like see, this is totally ridiculous. When I talk about at the social level, how the focus of the dog changes, the perceptions change. Okay, through this type of conversation happening. So you bring a dog under a type of a demand. Understand that, but it's reasonable within the context of what you're doing. Okay, understand that. So it's a totally different approach.
That they don't know. Two, teaching corrections are more of a guide than an aversive. That means we guide the dog into the correct behavior.
See, right here, guide. So think about what I said about responses, right? Already superficial, right? Guide the dog into the correct behavior. This is that word I talk about all the time that doesn't belong. Because what you're doing is you're generating responses. So where does that word belong? Into the correct response. And those responses can't be trusted to begin with. So why is this word behavior brought in? Because there's more confusion, right? It's meant to kind of firm up to say, oh, the behavior, there's something more meaningful happening when typically there isn't. That word doesn't belong there. It's about perceptions changing, not just about responses. See, the response side of things is totally this is what these trends are totally focused on appearances. There's no depth. Okay. So we're gonna stop part one here, but this is kind of like my master class, okay, on on what a picture looks like, okay, on what training is. He's calling this a master. This isn't a master class. Okay, this is a master class on, on appearances, but not even a master class. Okay, this is totally sideways. So this is part one. I'll be putting out part two as we go through this, but just to give you a crash course on what training is, but you need to think different. And, my encouragement is just think about the parenting example. Would you do what these trainers are doing in the middle of a relationship problem with a selfish child and just, incentivize, response that way and then just, kind of high-five and say, yeah, we're heading the right direction. There's a lot more to it than that. Just think about as a parent, your role through the authoritative parenting style, parental influence. So when I talk about control, influence, right? Those things are reconciled at the relationship by way of relationship through socially without that connection represents. These trainers, they're not dialed in that way at all. They just understand that. So thanks for watching. Stay tuned for part two.